City of Stevens Point Finance Committee meeting, recorded September 14, 2020.
President Johnson, the floor is yours.
Oh, zippity-doo-dah. Hello, everybody. And of course, now is the time when my dogs start barking. My sincere apologies. So I'll quickly call us to order at 7:08 a.m. or p.m., excuse me. And the first item on our agenda is roll call. So I don't know who's going to do that, Corey, or if Barry's on board here.
Okay, I can do it. Dalton. Okay, we'll maybe try her again.
Here, sorry, here.
Okay, that's okay. Shore. Alder Shore.
You go away.
Okay, my space bar didn't work. I am here though.
Okay, Slowinski.
Here.
Morrow.
Here.
And Johnson.
And I am here. Thank you, Corey, very much for doing that.
Five present.
Okay, President Johnson, before you continue, I know that we have updates and a PowerPoint from Corey. I need to turn over control to Alderperson Laddick. Or Alderperson Laddick, Jesus. Sorry, yeah. I'm admitting people into the room. Corey, that means you're going to have to monitor the room and admit people in as they pop in. And we've had that happen frequently. So please keep an eye on that. And after the presentation, you can return control if you so choose. I'm making you host now.
All right, while that happens, the second item on our agenda is update on the 2021 operating budget, including information on health insurance fund. And thank you, Corey, for sending that out in advance. I really appreciate that. It gave me time to look at it and absorb at least some of it.
Okay,
so
great.
Continue.
Yep. So the presentation, we've got a few updates on the operating budget, and then we'll also have our capital budget presentation tonight. So the first item on the agenda is the update on the operating budget. And I know last month we had talked about how the operating budget is looking, and I had indicated that, you know, of course, with everything going on and also with lower net new construction numbers that we have going into the next budget year, that we do expect the operating budget to be a little bit tighter this year, and that we need to find sort of a solution to fill that gap. And I mentioned that looking at the health insurance fund and looking at our self-insured rates is probably going to be that solution for 2021. And I know the committee had asked me to provide some information just to make sure that, okay, that's a financially viable solution, that we have enough money in our health insurance fund, obviously, to pay claims. So a couple of things that I included. One is the overall balance in the health insurance fund. And we like to keep about a $3 million balance just to make sure that we do have enough money to pay claims. What you can see here is that the history, 2013 and 2014 were bad years as far as our health insurance. And then really since 2014, we've had very strong performance, and now that fund has increased to over $4 million. So that's a key threshold that kind of makes us take a step back and say, okay, you know, the balance here has grown. It's recovered very nicely from some of the issues that we had in 2013 and 2014. So maybe it's time to start looking at our funding rates, and if the rates that we're currently essentially charging ourselves, but also charging our employees, because they do pay a percentage as well of the premium, make sure that those are still appropriate. And then I also included this graph showing the annual performance. So basically what you can see, like I said, 2013, 2014 were pretty bad years. But then 2015 on, 16, 17, 18, 19, and the July 2020 numbers. So basically this is 2020 year to date. You can see that we have been having a surplus of several $100,000 a year in our health insurance program. So, an overall summary of where we're at. We're on track to have our 6th year in a row with a surplus, which is obviously a very good thing. We've traditionally tried to keep about $3 million in this fund. Now that we're at $4 million, that's maybe a little bit higher than where we really need to be. And then finally, just a disclosure that this is obviously the current situation where we're at right now. It's not a guarantee of what will happen in the future. Certainly 2 or 3 years down the road, could we find ourselves in a place where we need to readjust health insurance premiums and bring them back up and adjust for that? Obviously, that's always a possibility, but I think, you need to make the best decisions with the information that you have at the time. And, this looks like the best decision, especially considering, the current budgetary situation. I think it would be a little bit of a different conversation if the budget was good and if we really didn't need to make this adjustment to make the 2021 budget work. So this is, sort of a preliminary look. Obviously, we won't be presenting the operating budget until October, but wanted to give you a look at what this looks like, since this likely will have to be a piece of how we fix the operating budget and make that work for 2021. And I guess maybe I'll take a break here to just see if there are any questions about this topic before I go on to the next one.
Alder Morrow.
Who spoke?
Alder Morrow.
Okay, I was going to say, before I speak, I'll go to the committee members first. Go ahead, Alder Morrow.
I think it's great that our health insurance fund is so high, but a couple heart attacks or something major, and that whole fund could be gone. That's why I'd be really concerned about trying to reduce our rates, because healthcare costs are only going to go up no matter what. And $4 million might seem like a lot, but if you have a couple things happen, that could easily be gone really, really fast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's a fair concern. Certainly healthcare is expensive. There's no question about that. With our health insurance fund, we do keep stop loss insurance, and basically we pay for the first $80,000 for an individual person per year. So if somebody does have something like that happen, let's say a heart attack, a cancer, something like that, it is very expensive. The city would pay the first $80,000 of that through the health insurance fund, and then the amount above $80,000 is covered with the stop loss. One thing that I can tell you is, every year we do unfortunately have catastrophic claims that hit stop loss. I'd say probably on average about 5 or 6 that would hit stop loss. In a good year, it might be 3 or 4. That's actually a good year for us. And then a bad year, like if you look at 2013 and 2014, those were years where we had about 12 people who hit stop loss. So, it's not necessarily how catastrophic an individual claim is. It's really how many catastrophic claims do you have? Do you have 5 or 6, or do you have 10 or 12? And absolutely, you can see what happened in the years where we had 10 or 12 catastrophic claims.
First, I'll go to the committee, Mr. Mayor, just to make sure that any other committee members? Alder Shore.
Alder Shore.
I'm good.
Okay.
Alder Dalton, I have my hand raised. I don't know if you can see it or not. But the question I have, Comptroller Laddick, if the recommendation you're bringing to us is to contribute less to the health insurance fund this year, could you remind us maybe what that number is that we've typically been committing to, and then what what rate you might be recommending for this year?
So this would actually be for the 2021 budget. So we would keep the rates the same, for the rest of 2020. Typically, we only set rates on an annual basis. And then you have different rates for both a single and a family plan. So what we do is we don't just make a specific, okay, we're going to transfer, $3 million to the health insurance fund. We actually set a rate for what that health insurance premium is. And then we would charge the city portion to each department's line item. And then also the city employees, if it's a full-time employee, they would pay 10%. Right now, part of this as well is that there's a ratio between your single plan and your family plan as far as, okay, how, a family plan basically is equal to how many single plans or what percentage is that. So, and right now looking at that, we're probably a little bit high on the family plan. So we would likely just reduce the family plan premium rate. And, off the top of my head, I'd say you're looking at probably around 5 to 7% as far as the reduction in the premium. Does that answer
your? Yeah, that gets at it. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I guess I have maybe more of a clarification, Alder Slowinski. So if I'm understanding this right, Corey, we're at that $4 million mark for this year, or what we have in our for surplus. And what you were explaining, that if we have an unfortunate year where we have more individuals that reach that threshold where, that 80,000, is that, so basically say we have 10 people, or say 10 people hit that 80,000. So we're looking at $800,000. Is that kind of how I'm understanding that? So, even if we were to freeze the rates for 2021, or maybe even decrease them like you're asking, it'd have to be a pretty bad 2021 to really, knock that surplus down. Am I understanding that correctly?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. That you would either need really a lot of catastrophic claims that hit that threshold to go to stop loss, or you would just need, your performance in general to really take a turn, as far as the number of people that need care for different things.
And I guess that's where my concern is. We always talk about, we really don't want to decrease, because then if we get ourselves in trouble, now we have to, there's a rate increase to the employees that, that's substantial, to recover. So I guess, I mean, I'm all for decreasing rates whenever we can, but again, I just want to make sure that we're not going to get ourselves kind of in a corner where we're going to have to, get in trouble and be unfortunate where we have a bad 2021, and now we're getting close to that, that surplus is wiped out. So that's my only concern.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Alder Slawinski. Any other members of the committee before I go to the mayor, since he had his hand up? Before I speak, I will go with the mayor first. I will keep my questions till later.
Thank you very much. To answer some of the questions a little more generally that came up, the rates are always commensurate to the expenses. I know that the word surplus was used. The fund is not a surplus. It's not like there's extra money in there. That money is set aside specifically to manage our health insurance. And it's there if the employees need it, with, of course, our cap rate at $80,000. So Alder Slawinski's right. It would have to be a devastating 2021 to use up a significant amount of that fund. But then, of course, in 2022, we would have to very likely raise rates to make sure that our fund remains viable. That's key. But if you look at the trends, and Corey, if you want to go back one slide, we're looking at the annual performance for the health insurance fund. You can see that generally since 2015, we have been a healthier city. And I think that we need to give some credit to a plan that Corey and Lisa had come up with a while ago, and that's our employee wellness program. We incentivize our employees to participate in an annual wellness program that we meet. We have people that come around monthly offering advice. There's emails that go out talking about how you can change your diets or your exercise habits to make you a little more healthier. The safety committee has implemented things that reduce the number of work-related injuries. All of these things that your staff has been working on and your employees have allowed us to see a significant reduction in our health insurance costs. And I think that this is what you're seeing is a return on investment. We incentivize our family plan employees. If they participate, we give them $1,000, and that's going to happen in December. We add that to their HSA. And the individual plan employees are allowed to do the same thing at a reduced rate. I think it's $500. Is that right, Corey? $500?
Yes, that's right. Yep.
$500. So that initial investment encourages our employees to participate in the wellness program, and it's paying back significantly, I think, in what you see here on the graph. That small investment is turning things around, and now the city and the employees will hopefully benefit next year when we're able to potentially put a reduction in on premiums. It's because we're healthier, and you owe that thanks, that gratitude to not only your staff, again, Corey and Lisa had come up with it, but all the department heads who participate and actively encourage their employees to, and all of the employees that participate in that program as well and take their health seriously. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'll echo that because my employer has a wellness plan, and it's the reason I lost 50 pounds and reduced my blood pressure, my blood serum cholesterol, and my blood sugar, so they work. Thank you very much for creating those. Do we know what, and I think this is before your time, Corey, maybe, what contributed to the kind of 2013, 2014 challenges that are listed on the graph? And if you don't know, that's fine. I was just curious.
Yeah, I mean, I do remember that the claims experience was adverse. I actually started with the city in 2013, so maybe I was bad luck, but I
don't think so. I don't think so.
At least the first 2 years. But it really was, kind of like I said, a normal year for us is 5 or 6 stop loss claims. And in 2013 and 2014, we were having about 10 to 12. So it just seemed like there were just a lot of
unfortunate situations. Yeah. I know I'm on HR for the county, and we discussed this on Thursday night, and the consensus of that committee was we're also seeing a surplus at the county, and the consensus of the committee was to use that to really help employees better manage some of those costs and provide an added benefit to the employees. So because we are into that territory where we're above, the designated surplus.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be my feeling in this situation as well. All right, are there any comments or questions from members of the public? You'll have to give me time because I cannot see all of you. All right. All right, thanks, Corey. It was a good discussion so far. Please continue.
Okay, so then the next topic that I wanted to talk about on a very preliminary basis, since this is still pretty early, in the year to get real specific on where we think we're going to be with the tax rate. But I did want to give you an update, just sort of to let you know where we're at. And initially, I know when we talked in July, I had mentioned that, with our lower net new construction number, that really forces us to keep that property tax levy that we charge for operations down, so that there may be, some additional flexibility with capital as far as to build in some more money for capital while keeping the levy reasonable overall. And that really has shifted almost completely, unfortunately, because of two extenuating factors that we will have to contend with when we're working on the 2021 budget. One is reduced personal property aid for 2021, and the other is a somewhat technical issue with the Department of Revenue and how they valued our TIF districts. And I'll get into a little bit more detail about both of these topics. So the first one is reduced exempt personal property aid. A few years ago, the state of Wisconsin decided that they wanted to take certain types of personal property that were taxable and that we charged property taxes on and make them exempt from taxation. And they agreed to give us an aid payment to make up for that. And then the requirement is that that's used basically to offset that tax levy because they didn't want to see a tax increase from making certain types of property exempt. So everything, initially worked fine. However, the first year that they did this program, they did make an error in their formula as far as how they distributed that aid. So they're coming back now and saying, we'd like to make an adjustment, or basically we are going to make an adjustment for 2021 to fix this error in the formula. So as a result of that, the aid payment is going to be $51,000 less for 2021, which means that then, because this aid payment directly offsets the tax levy, that results in an offsetting increase in your property tax levy. This is a one-off type correction because they have since changed their formula, and we've already absorbed the impact from that. So this would just be a one-off impact for 2021. And then the other issue is related to the valuation of our TIF districts. The state estimates the value of all of our TIF districts every year. There were some issues with that this year that resulted in more property value being in our TIF districts, which means that there's less to support the general tax levy. It is actually positive for those TIF districts. They'll have a little bit more revenue, but the problem is there's a little bit less tax base then to support the general levy. And when the same tax levy is spread over less value, the result is an increase in tax rate. And with this one, what they're going to do, they already locked in the values, even though we did timely report the issue to them. But they've already locked it in for this year. So what they do in this situation is they do what they call a correction the following year. So over the course of 2 years, it will all even out as far as the impacts to both the Tif districts and to the general tax levy. And in their book, they say, well, you know, in the big scheme of things over the course of 2 years, we made up for it. So, you know, we're good, we're even. Of course, one of the issues that presents is then that sort of is another sort of extenuating circumstance that pushes up the tax rate for 2021 on a one-off type basis. So on a preliminary basis, basically, rather than a 1.7% increase in the tax levy, we'd be looking at about 3%. And I've really tried to figure out, okay, how can we try to bring this back down to keep this reasonable, to sort of flatten out that spike, especially since some of these impacts really are one time. Two solutions that I figured out that should bring it down to about a 2.5% increase. That's a preliminary number at this point, but just to give you a general idea of the kind of range that we're looking at. One is we are saving money in interest costs on our debt service. So there's some money that's available there. So ordinarily, you know, if we're increasing the amount of money that we're borrowing to fund capital, we also have to obviously increase our debt service levy by a similar amount to keep the amount of money that we're repaying in principal similar or the same to what we're borrowing. However, with the interest costs going down, that does create $50,000 where we can offset some of that impact on the levy because we're paying less money in interest. And then the other solution that I came up with is using the debt. We do have a little bit of fund balance in our debt service fund, basically utilizing 50,000 of that to flatten out that spike on a one-time basis. And then actually, because these impacts are sort of one time, going into the following year, you know, the personal property aid will go back to its normal amount. It'll increase by that 50,000 that it was reduced. So then that will offset the impact as far as not having that debt service fund balance to plug into the equation. So with that, I guess take any questions about either of those.
And we'll use the same system as last time, going to committee members first. Questions about this information? And
This is Alder Slowinsky.
Yep, go ahead.
So you had said that we have a balance in that debt service, I guess, fund. What is the balance in there? And I guess, what are we using that for?
So, and I'll get you the exact number here. It's a little bit over $700,000 as far as what's currently in there. And one of the things that it can be used for is it can be used in situations like this where, you know, you do need to sort of flatten out a tax levy impact. But otherwise, I mean, it's really been kept as sort of a debt service reserve fund, essentially.
it just seems a little high for just quite a bit of money just sitting there. I guess I didn't know that, I wasn't even aware that we had that debt service fund.
Mhm.
But anyway, I guess that's for another day to discuss. But I guess in my mind, that's probably where I would like to see it come from to basically offset this
Mhm.
one-time spike, I guess.
Mhm.
That's all I got.
Thank you, Alder Slowinski. You asked the question I was going to ask. Thank you for doing that. Other members of the committee?
Alder Dalton, I have my hand raised. I don't know if you can see it.
I can't. I don't know why.
I don't know why.
It's,
So the two solutions that you have proposed, Comptroller Laddick, are sufficient to cover and flatten this from your perspective? Is there still going to be a gap? And does the first component of the solution, the spending less on interest, does that mean we're just pushing off, payments into, basically just putting that cost off into the future, understanding that this is kind of a one-time imbalance?
Mhm. So, first of all, we're not really pushing the costs out into the future. With the reduction in the amount of money that we have to spend on interest, basically we could use it for a couple of different things. We could use it to offset the tax levy and keep the tax rate down. We could also pay off additional money in principal. That would be another option where you say, okay, well, we're paying less in interest, so now we can pay more in principal. And then, you could follow that decision making and say, okay, well, are we going to try and use this to reduce our total debt, or are we going to borrow an extra $50,000 in capital? But, we're not necessarily we're not delaying principal payments or anything like that, and of course we don't really decide, we'd like to spend less money in interest. It's really just, as we've paid off some of our higher interest debt, we legitimately have a savings, in that area. And it's just a matter of, okay, if you have a savings, how do you want to use it, and what's the purpose that you want to use it for? And then as far as the question about, okay, is this sufficient to sort of flatten out the increase? Basically what this does, based on some fairly initial projections, so they're not set in stone at this point, but basically it gets it down to a 2.5% increase. So it gets it from about 3% to about 2.5%. So it doesn't completely eliminate any increase at all. There is still some impact there, but tries to keep that increase reasonable.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Other questions from the committee? Before I go to the public, I do have a question. You said for something about rules about how the debt service fund can be used. Is that under statute, or is it under our fiscal policies?
Rules on how the debt service fund can be used. Under state statute, you can only use the debt service fund for paying debt service, unless you don't have any outstanding debt at all. But if you have outstanding debt, then you do need to use that money only for repaying debt.
Okay, and that makes sense because we collected it for a specific reason, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's correct.
So then, but this would be allowable?
So basically, because we would still be using this for paying debt service, what we would be doing is, so since we do have some balance in the fund, we simply aren't levying the full amount of our debt service.
I see. Okay. So we're not using it. We're just not adding to it as much.
Yeah, exactly. We're still using this money to pay debt, but it's just, you know, ordinarily we'd say, okay, well, you know, if we have $5 million in debt service payments, you know, we're going to levy $5 million to make those payments. And in this case, what we're effectively doing, and this isn't the real number, but rather than levying, you know, the full $5 million, we're levying 50,000 less than that.
I see. Got it. Got it. All right. Thank you for clarifying that in my mind. Members of the public or other alders with questions about this particular information? And as my boss always says, wait 7 to 8 seconds. I didn't hear anything. So please continue, Corey.
Okay, so that is the update on the operating budget. So then the next piece would be actually agenda item number 3, which is the capital budget. So, so getting right into the capital budget presentation. First thing that I just wanted to clarify as far as where we are in the process. So September Finance Committee is when we do the initial presentation, chance to ask any questions, express any initial concerns, you know, state if there's anything that you'd like to look into. Certainly all that is in order. Typically for September Finance, we're not looking for formal action. The thought process is get it all out there, you know, give an initial period to sort of ask questions or express concerns. And then for October Finance and October Council, after everybody has had a month to review it and consider it and evaluate anything that they need to evaluate, then we do bring it to Finance and Council for formal action.
All righty.
Okay. So first of all, to talk about the sources of funding for our capital budget. For 2021, we plan on using about $5 million in borrowing proceeds. So basically borrowing that money. And that does match how much we would be repaying in principal for our capital debt. So the point is to keep our total amount of debt stable. And then the other $1,221,000 would be a combination both of using fund balance, which is the money that we have left over from one budget year to another, either because revenues come in higher than expected or because expenses come in lower than budgeted. So every year we do use a considerable portion of debt service, since we do typically beat our budget on an annual basis. And then the remaining portion of that would actually be proceeds from Tif District Repayments. So we do have some Tif districts that in the past, the general fund has had to advance a rather significant amount of money to. And we're in the fortunate position that both of those Tif districts are now repaying the general fund. So we do have the ability to utilize that as well. Those repayments increase our fund balance, or the amount of money that we have in our general fund. So then that also becomes available for capital. As far as the exact breakdown between fund balance and the proceeds from Tif repayments, I'm still working through getting a breakdown on that. Part of it depends on how our overall operating budget trends through the remaining portion of the year to see how much of that can be fund balance. So then as far as the overall capital budget size, So for the 2020 budget, we had a capital budget size of 5.85 million. For 2021, we're looking at 6.22 million. So that is an increase of 6.4%. Certainly, I think we're trying to do the best we can in terms of funding capital and, you know, to try to stay ahead of the various needs for the city. And my goal really is to increase the capital budget by at least $150,000 a year just to keep up with inflation. This year we were able to do a little bit more than that, and that is due to those Tif repayments starting to come in. That does provide some extra money that can be utilized. So, and then also for the initial request, this year we had an initial request of a little bit over 7.9 million. So we had to cut about 1.7 million from the capital budget. And as you can see, actually, in the coming years, especially 2022, 23, and 24, look to be a little bit more difficult in terms of the capital requests that are out there in coming years. Put this graph together to show requested versus recommended, so you can see that, you know, the initial request was about 7.9, and then we're bringing that down to the 6.2, so you can see that adjustment was made. Little bit was added to 2022 capital. 2023 actually went down a little bit, and we'll get into why that is a little bit later. And but what you can see is that we do really 2022 and 2023 especially, you know, you definitely see some challenges out there. So this year was the type of year where we tried to get some things done that we knew we probably wouldn't be able to do for at least a couple of years if we didn't do them for 2021. So which is kind of how it tends to go with capital, that, you know, sometimes you have to take advantage of the ability to do things when you can, because you don't always have a capital budget with a lot of room in it to do some of the things that you'd like to do. So getting into the request as far as what we're recommending for funding, the first category is citywide.
Corey, can we just go back before you move on? I have two questions.
Mm-hmm.
So the budget surpluses that have been added to the fund balance, and that's great that we're having projects come in under you know, under budget, and but is that also operational dollars, or is it just capital dollars that are going into this budget surplus? So that's question one.
Okay, so you are basically referring to the use of fund balance?
Correct.
Okay, yeah. So with the use of fund balance, it's primarily operational dollars. So if we have remaining operational dollars from any operational line item, basically, whether that's money for wages or money for fuel or anything, basically, if it doesn't get spent in that year, then that money becomes available to be put into capital.
Okay, and so we're not putting any of the capital projects that we've levied for but came in under budget, because if I remember right, I don't know if Isidore, if it was Prentice Street came in under budget, and there was some discussion that Fremont may come in under budget. Those dollars, and then I would add to that, I don't remember what year, was that 2017 maybe, where we budgeted $5.5 million for a city hall?
Hi, Carol, this is Thomas Leak, District 8 Alder President. Yeah, so I'm actually
Alder Leak, you
not really on
are...
Finance Committee.
Can someone
they're doing
or you have to mute him.
On that, and I didn't know that you had called, but
there we go. Thank you, Corey. So that was part of our capital budget. and any of those capital projects, where is that money?
Okay, so for City Hall, because that project didn't move forward, we didn't borrow the money for City Hall.
Okay.
So that's basically where
Okay.
that went. We just didn't do the borrowing. For some of those other ones, like especially with the road projects, at the end of every year, we do go through with the department heads as far as, the money that they have left over to say, okay, does this project still need to happen? What's the status? And then they'll give me requests to encumber the funds if the project hasn't happened yet. And typically what'll happen with road projects is some of that money gets used for other road projects. So, and similar to, this year with the fall paving project that Director Badoon
Okay.
talked about, where, they plan on, kind of plan somewhat conservatively. And then if they have money left over and they can do some extra paving and get some other things done,
Sure.
then they do that with a fall paving project.
Okay. Thanks.
Mhm.
Sorry, but
Oh,
I
that's
needed to have those answered. Thank you very much.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. So going on, so we've got for citywide and IT, it's the first category. We have a city server storage array for $150,000. We've got for the fire department a paging system upgrade as far as getting that to interface with the county dispatch system. We have some firewall work for $60,000. We've got some camera system improvements for $50,000. And then every year we do budget $50,000 a year for citywide building maintenance. And that helps for if any needs come up where we have a piece of equipment fail, we have a boiler go out or a heater go out or something. That's what that money is used for, and can also be used for some of the odds and ends that might come up. We have a upgrade to the call manager for our phone system for $40,000, and then also a Wi-Fi upgrade at City Hall, Police Department, and Fire Department for $15,000. So, any questions on any of those? Okay, seeing none, move on to airport. So for 2021 capital, we've got $5,000 budgeted for pavement maintenance. And then also, I just did want to note for 2022, the airport is also looking at a runway reconstruction. And because that project does involve a lot of federal funding as well, that is something that we do need to get on the radar screen and talk about, basically before, next year's budget process, just because the airport manager and Director Lemke do need to know, where the city council's support is for that project, just because they are going to be, moving forward with grant procedures and so forth. Then for transit. So for transit, this one is a little bit unique, but every year we do give transit an operating subsidy because certainly that's not an operation that can, support itself on passenger fares. And there's a mix of both state and federal money that operates the transit system. So for the 2020 budget, we did budget a subsidy of $422,000 to support the transit operations. Now, with the CARES Act, that did include additional federal funds for transit, which more or less eliminates the need for that operating subsidy from the city for the $422,000. So that's certainly some great news. And there are a number of other municipalities that have said, okay, well, with that being the case, we're going to amend our budget and we're going to, pull back that operating subsidy because, you don't need it. You anticipated needing it and you don't. And actually, we need it as the city. That's the thought process that a lot of other municipalities have gone through, especially ones that really were hit hard by COVID-19 as far as budgetary performance.
I have a question about that. Is there two things? I think if we do that, and that ends up being the recommendation of not only the finance committee, but council, I would make sure that we have follow-up on that to make sure that that money is used accordingly and not just sort of sitting in a cookie jar, as Supervisor Jeannie Dodge would always talk about, cookie jars. The other is, could we opt to use, let's say, a third of it and not allocate or not levy for 2/3 of it, or half of it and half, or a quarter and 3/4? Is that an option as well?
So yes, I mean, basically you have two options. So, you can pull back that subsidy, or, we could still pay that subsidy, but then having transit set aside that surplus for the coming capital needs. And certainly if you're looking at that option, we can certainly, I think, provide, if you want to provide some oversight there as far as, okay, what is that money used for? What's the expectation for that money? I think that would be, certainly in order. And I see that Joel Lemke raised his hand. So,
so you can see the hand raising and I cannot.
Yeah, I wonder if it's maybe just the host that can see that. So
apparently that may be the case. So
I believe it is.
All right, Director Lemke, since you have your hand up, which I cannot see, I will call on you.
Sure, can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Great, thanks. All good stuff that we're talking about here, because thankfully that funding does provide some extra dollars. One thing, so you all know, that we're going to be looking at with the people, the partners, whether that's other communities, the university, stuff like that we have contracts with and provide service with, is we are going to be kind of letting the 2021 budget be reflective of the savings in 21. And then we're going to go forward with letting the 22 budgets be reflective of savings in 21, because my understanding is right now there's a lot of people that feel that there's going to be some bleed over into next year on this funding also. So for consistency's sake, what we can do prior to adopting this whole thing is Corey and I work together and say, here's how to kind of roll this forward. So the way we work with our partners is the same way that we're handling the city stuff. And like Corey mentioned, we already know that our savings and operational dollars is going to cover our capital request for this year, and it may very likely be quite a bit more. So we could handle it that way.
Thank you, Director Lemke. All right. Thanks for the dialogue. I just always have lots of questions.
President Johnson, Alder Kneebone here. I just have a comment.
Absolutely.
I would say I've been on the Transportation Committee now since I was first elected in 2015, and both Joel and Susan Lemke are great stewards of taxpayer dollars. So I would not like to see too much money get cut out of this, because one never knows what might happen in the future. So, and I know that they will continue to be good stewards of public funding. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks,
Okay,
Corey.
so then basically for
President Johnson,
2021.
if I could just, I was trying to get your attention.
Yep, and you were invisible for a while there.
I feel that way sometimes, especially at home.
I bet you do.
If I could just make a comment, Corey, could you please go back one slide? If we look at the potential subsidy, pulling back that subsidy, the recommendation at the bottom of the page is still paying the subsidy, but having transit set aside surplus for capital. If you go back even a couple slides, you don't need to do that, Corey, because everybody has the copy. If you look at the 2022, 2023 capital budget requests, we're not going to be able to fund all of this. Having the ability for transit to set aside some of that money now for those capital projects that they have in 2022 and 2023 is going to have a relatively significant impact on our ability to meet the necessary urgent requests that our departments are going to have in that 2022 and 2023 cycle. I just want to put that out there because we have to look long-term on this. We've got some challenges coming up in the next couple of years regarding capital.
Yeah. And you know, my thoughts exactly, because so one thing, if you look at the capital plan for 2023, right now there's a request for transit for $285,000. So that would be a big portion of that $400,000 surplus that they're going to have. And if you look at 2023, you can see, you know, we've already got over $10 million in requests for that. And the reason why this green line, the recommended budget, is a little bit lower is basically setting aside that money for these bus purchases in 2023 or bus replacements. And that brings down that number a little bit. Unfortunately, you can see, I mean, it's 2023 is, you know, a good $4 million over, you know, what we have to work with for that year, what we expect to have. So unfortunately, that $285,000, it helps a little bit, and I think it's important. You know, it still leaves obviously a gap there, but I think, you know, the more that we can do to try to offset that difficult budget year, you know, I think would be good.
Sure.
Okay. So anything else on transit and capital? Okay, so next up we have Department of Public Works, some of the engineering items. So we've got $80,000 budgeted for traffic signal improvements. This is an annual item. Our traffic signal system does need regular capital replacement. That equipment doesn't last forever, so we try to keep an amount in there for that to keep everything functioning. Now we've also got $60,000 to replace the parking lot at the Fire Department Station 1. We've got $50,000 for survey equipment that the engineering department uses in the field. We've got $40,000 for portable changeable message boards. We do have $25,000 for an initial DPW facility study. And we've got $15,000 for cameras at the streets garage and $12,500 for painting at the streets garage. So anything we need to talk about with the DPW engineering requests?
Comptroller Laddick, Oliver Dalton, I have a question.
Sure.
About the facility study, wondering if 25,000 is a conservative or realistic estimate. I know often getting like plant consultants in to put together a plan, there's not, I feel like we've been out of a good estimating ballpark range in the last couple of proposals and things that we've seen come forward. And I'm wondering what insurance there is that study will have an understanding of how technologies and fleets may significantly change in the future, and that maybe in 10 years we have a lot of self-driving vehicles, or the fleets and our infrastructure might be moving towards a pretty different type of pattern. And so to spend $25,000 to assess the facilities, you know, is that expertise not within the staff and how we already operate?
Mm-hmm. Sure. And I guess I think either Director Badoon or the mayor, do one of you could probably explain it a little better?
I can start, and if the Director Badoon has anything to add, we can certainly do that. So since I was an alderperson, even since before that, we wanted the streets facility out of Buchel Park. It's on one edge of town. It's significantly inefficient to run our operation from one end of town to the other. However, it's also crazy expensive to rebuild a new facility. As you can see from the capital request, the streets garage painting, the paint has peeled off of the masonry building to the point where it's affecting the masonry. And I think I outlined that in my capital budget summary. We're not even able to fund the entire painting project. We're going to paint the lower half because that's the worst. We don't have the ability necessarily to maintain the facility as it is now. We have equipment, tens of thousands of dollars of expensive equipment that's sitting outside in the weather because we don't have the ability to do that, to put it inside. So moving the Department of Public Works streets garage has been a priority for many people, but most significantly in recent history, the council has determined that we are going to take steps to move forward incrementally to make sure that this happens, because taking one big bite is just not going to work. So we're doing it in steps. The first step, of course, is that facility study to determine a plausible location, the size and general needs for the facility, to give us a ballpark idea of what we're going to be looking for so we can budget appropriately in the years to come. So I would say that $25,000 is as accurate an estimate as we can give you for that particular study. We're not looking at designing or engineering the facility, but rather what might we move it and what might this facility look like? And that's what this initial $25,000 is for. Director Badoon, anything to add there?
Really, just to reiterate what you've said, that this is kind of the initial part of it to get us started. This is going to be the first of several steps to complete the study before we even get into final design. But I think it's important that we have an understanding of the direction we're going and get some of those, at least magnitude of order sort of costs ready, because right now we don't necessarily know what we're planning to. And trying to program in the future. So this is that first step there. It's not going to answer all of our questions, but it'll answer several of them, and it'll probably identify then those questions still remaining yet to be answered in future endeavors. But I've been working with a couple of consultants to kind of get to a comfortable scope and that price there. So I do believe for what we're looking to accomplish this time, that the price there, the cost is relatively accurate to what it is we're looking to accomplish.
And as I said, this is a step. That's how a lot of these larger scale projects work, especially with capital. We put it in queue. We're not going to have the funds to do it this year. We're not going to have the funds available to do it next year or even the year after. But you put it in queue, and as you can see from the outline that I provided, many of these projects have been in the capital budget planned for several years. That's the most efficient way to get things done, so we don't have a big change all of a sudden. This will get us started, and we'll continue to move along that process. And hopefully in the next 10 years or so, we're going to see a new facility in a central location.
Thank you. I appreciate and understand the need for the facility, and Director Badoon has articulated before, and I think that makes sense. I just am highly skeptical that a consultant can come in and tell our leadership and employees in the department how to best organize that flow and what might best be available. And that I guess I just have confidence that perhaps that capacity is already existing within our department.
Okay. And it looks like Alder Jennings also has a question about this.
Okay, thanks for letting me know. Alder Jennings, please go ahead.
Yeah, I guess maybe this follows a little bit along the lines of Alder Dalton, but I did have, I mean, this has come up so many times. I have in the back of my memory that there was a facility study done because there were projections on cost and location. And this may go back to 2014, 2013. Am I incorrect about that? So that's one question I have. And also, given the cost of this facility, why is this imperative to do this study now? And given how much change there will be by the time there's money to actually build a facility, this seems like a very early step that, consistent with what Alder Dalton is saying, doesn't need to hire a consultant that produces a result that already much is known inside the department on this. I just bristle at these studies. How much money does a city spend on studies to do what is very much known internally by staff and even council members themselves? It just seems like, given how tight the budget is, I'm just questioning this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Jennings. All right. Corey, I'm counting on you to let me know who's got their hands raised. Otherwise, please proceed.
Okay. All right. So, and then getting into the street projects. So, first of all, and I know we've talked about this quite a bit, but just for anyone who isn't aware of some of the terminology. So, when we're talking about road construction, we're typically talking about two different types of major projects. The first is your street reconstruction, which is when you replace both the road surface as well as the utilities underneath. You're basically doing everything, you're digging everything up and replacing the whole works. And then we also have street resurfacing, where you're really only replacing the road surface, you're leaving the utilities and any curb and gutter in place. So for road projects for 2021, we're budgeting $1,950,000 for a reconstruction that goes along 5th, 1st Street, Portage, and Smith Street on the north side. That is the city portion only. So for the utility work that's involved in terms of new water mains, new sewer mains, that's covered by the utility department. And one of the exciting things about this project is that it does include a rather significant upgrade to the stormwater infrastructure to address the north side flooding issues that have existed for some time. So I know that that's been a priority for a while to get some of those issues addressed so that the north side doesn't flood quite as easily. And then for road projects, we also have $750,000 budgeted for resurfacing Borum, Coy, and Heffron streets. This is the city industrial park off of Country Club Drive is that area. And then we also have $750,000 budgeted for general road surface improvements, which can include chip sealing, can also include some extra resurfacing projects. So the total amount that we're proposing for road projects is $3,450,000. So, and then also to give just a little bit more information. So as far as the road construction budgets and the history, as you can see, you know, the $3,450,000 is still much more than we were budgeting a few years ago. We did more or less double the amount that we're putting into road construction. So it is down about $100,000, and that was really more of a coincidence of just how the projects fell and how much each component was. So are there any, I guess, questions about the road projects? I also have some general analysis as well as far as where we are with road construction. But
any questions? I have a question.
I do want to. I do want to come in.
Yeah, go ahead, Alder. Sure.
Thank you, Chair. So first, let me quickly echo a word of thanks that I express every so often. It relates to the size of the request and all the difficult choices that have to be made. And this applies on the capital and operating side. Just we know how much work goes in between the comptroller, treasurer, mayor, and department heads to reach difficult consensus and difficult choices. What I wanted to inquire a little bit, we about half the council, I think, was around when we increased the capital budget significantly several years ago because of a deferred maintenance problem, a problem where our budget just wasn't matching with the street maintenance, all the streets that we're responsible for, right? And then more recently, we heard really concerning news about what was happening in the construction industry and prices. Which is a roundabout way of asking now, looking at what's being looked at here for 2021. I guess, in relation to what we're seeing happening to cost in the industry, but also in terms of those choices, and are we being shown a plan that doesn't have us slipping, and so I know dollars per mile is going up and up and up, and we don't want to fall behind on how many miles a year we do, if I'm being clear.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and so actually that's a great segue into the rest of my, have a couple more slides on road construction more generally as far as our original plan and sort of how we're doing in comparison to that plan. So I'll cover these. So basically prior to 2018, we did around a half mile of street reconstruct per year. We didn't really have a set amount for resurfacing. We didn't really do a whole lot of resurfacing. There just wasn't a lot of money available. We adopted the plan in 2016, and the plan was to get 1.58 miles of reconstruct a year and 3.17 miles of resurfacing a year. And again, the reconstruct is when you're digging everything up and replacing the utilities. Resurfacing is just replacing the road surface itself. And under that plan, we would have had a new road surface every 30 years, which was probably, somewhat of the ideal plan. I mean, after 30 years, all of our roads would be in somewhat decent condition. Now, at that time, we also did consider, just sort of based on how much we wanted to spend on road construction, the option of doing 1.58 miles of reconstruct and 1.58 miles of resurfacing a year and that would have gotten us a new road surface every 45 years. So basically, rather than doing about 4.5 miles a year, do 3 miles a year. At that time, the council went with, the first option for a little bit over 4.5 miles. Now, as Alder Shore mentioned, and we've been having this conversation a lot about construction costs and some of the other challenges with these projects. For 2020, we're doing 1.25 miles of reconstruct, and then for resurfacing, we're doing 1.16 miles. And that does include the fall paving project that we approved on the at the Board of Public Works meeting. For the 2021 road projects, the plan is 1.2 miles of reconstruct, and then 0.85 miles of resurfacing. However, with the resurfacing, I want to note that that doesn't include a fall paving project. So certainly the hope would be that after these projects are bid out, getting into 2021, that maybe around the same time as we have here, might be looking at a fall paving project with some of those unspent monies, anything that came in under budget, to be able to get a little bit further. But that's where we're at, right now. So basically my overall conclusion on that is, we aren't quite where we want to be, but we are better than where we were before. Just that, for example, before we were at 0.5 mile of reconstruct, we wanted to get to 1.5 miles, and basically we got to 1.2 miles. So we definitely are doing better, but we're still not to where we want to be. We definitely aren't on the 30-year replacement cycle that we had originally planned on, and it would, at this point, require some significant adjustments to get there with the current construction prices. But I think, overall, even if we can't get to the 30-year replacement cycle on our original plan, it would be nice if we could get these numbers bumped up to 1.5 miles of reconstruct and 1.5 miles of resurfacing. And I think that's just going to take building in additional money for the capital budget over time as we're able to do so.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I see the mayor looks like he's raising his hand.
Thank you. And it's outlined in the memo that was included in your packet in regards to road surface and replacement. As I said earlier, Scott could use all the money we can give him. We wound up taking Illinois Avenue out of the reconstruct capital budget this year to the tune of about $700,000 to make that budget deadline or guidelines that the council has imposed. The option, of course, and I don't know that we've come right out and say it, is really raise the debt service levy to make sure that we have the funds available to do the necessary infrastructure upkeep and replacement that we've committed to. I don't think it's something that we should do all at once, as Corey said. I think this should be incremental because our taxpayers, we have an obligation to those taxpayers too to keep the rates as low as we possibly can. But keeping the projects and infrastructure that we have, our buildings, our roads, our equipment, keeping those maintained is challenging. And we have a lot of roads now that could use a reconstruct. We don't have the funds available to do them all at once. So we're having to prioritize within the priorities to maintain our infrastructure, including the reconstructions and resurfacing of those roads.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on the road construction budget?
All right.
Okay, I'll take the silence as a no. All right. Okay, so then the next category is fleet vehicles and equipment. Obviously, it's important to maintain our fleet because otherwise we get affected by maintenance costs. And actually, I see that two participants just raised their hand.
And can you help me with that?
I'm looking to see who that.
Are you able to identify them?
Okay, well, I see that Alder Dalton has raised her hand.
All right.
Yeah, Corey, you'll have to flip through the screens of the
Yeah.
people on the call to see who it is, using the left and right arrows.
Yeah, let's go with Alder Dalton since she's part of the committee and apparently had her hand raised.
If Comptroller, if you would like to finish your comments about this section first, you're certainly welcome to, but otherwise I can just start in with my question.
Okay, well, I guess is the question related to fleet or?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, okay. So, and I wanted to make sure if somebody had something, you know, related to the previous section that we didn't jump around. But, oh, and I also see that Director Lemke has his hand raised. I don't know if that was from before or if Director Lemke has anything to add.
That must be old, sorry.
Yep,
Okay.
you have to physically lower your hand, Director Lemke.
The host can do it as well.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we've got replacement of police squads for $416,000. We've got new plow trucks for the Department of Public Works, 2 new plow trucks for $378,000. We've got a garbage truck for the Department of Public Works for $234,000. 2 new mowers for the Parks Department for $83,000. A mechanics truck that's used by the Department of Public Works, $69,000. We've got $41,000 for a van for the Department of Public Works. This is the van that they use for their road signs and for maintaining road signs. We've got $38,000 for a brush truck / plow for the fire department and $15,000 for a gator for the Parks Department. Okay.
All right. And Alder Dalton, did you want to ask your questions or provide your comments now? All right. Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess, you know, starting to get here into the wear and tear on vehicles, which are an infrastructure of their own versus the previous infrastructure we were just talking about, which is the roads. And so hoping to better understand, you know, I appreciate that the budget summary lays out that the police squad cars went from a replacement cycle of every 2 years to every 3 years, but from, you know, and that there's high and intense use of these cars as is described, but you could argue that maybe replacing them on a slightly longer scale or less at one time would allow some funds for the resurfacing that is insufficient. And so I'd like to hear a little, you know, further explanation of that, because then, you know, the trade-off is, well, if we resurface more roads, perhaps the intense use is less intense, and not just for those squad cars, but for every car that passes through this city. And you know, and how does that replacement cycle play out with other things like a plow truck, which also might, you know, if we have another additional plow truck, perhaps there are less accidents, and then there is actually less intense use of the squad cars and having to respond, and our other emergency vehicles having to respond to those calls.
Thanks for your comment. I would say if you're considering looking at years of use, I would think it more appropriate to look at the number of miles on the vehicle or the engine, because that's actually probably more appropriate. That's the way we do from work. What we do is look at miles, not years. I'll get you, Mr. Mayor, just a minute. Anybody else from the committee? All right. Sorry, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to make sure that the committee members didn't have anything else.
No, completely understandable. As Alder Dalton alluded to, we kind of summarized some of this in the narrative that was included in your packet as well. But I can speak to some of these individually, and I know that the police chief is available along with the parks director and Director Badoon from the Public Works Department. But the squads, for example, aren't just the mechanics of the car necessarily. These vehicles are often running almost 24/7. The cars stay running when they come into the office because they need to keep the computers up and running. They also, especially in winter, need to keep it warm inside. This is their office. And by it being their office, the things inside that office space also get used 24/7. You know, each officer doesn't have their own squad, so it's not like they're on for a shift and then the cars sit. They're in use all of the time by all of our officers. And simple things like the seat. Think of sitting in the same car seat for 24 hours a day for 3 years. Your seats get beat up. We've replaced seats when it was practical to do so. But then the other wear and tear that comes with it are, as President Johnson mentioned, the actual miles on the car. The miles aren't necessarily as important as the hours running, which is significantly higher in this case than you would have, say, for any other passenger type vehicle. You're not just getting in your car and going somewhere. These cars are out and the engine's running, putting undue wear and tear. And most mechanics will be able to tell you that an idling engine actually is harder than a moving vehicle, an engine that's actually working. So the replacement is typical across the country on a 2-year cycle. We've stretched it out to 3 years, but by the end of 3 years, these cars get pretty uncomfortable, pretty beat up, and we've replaced almost all of the parts that are practical to do so. It doesn't necessarily make sense to put an engine, a brand new engine, in an old car because things like Wisconsin salt and the rust starts getting to it. As I said, the interior of the car itself becomes used to the point where it's impractical to expect to ask anyone to sit in there for any length of time. So, the police chief, as I said, can speak more about it, but I would encourage any alderperson who has not yet done a ride along with the officers to do so, to see exactly what sort of rigors those vehicles go through on a daily basis, let alone all of the things where they have emergency situations and need to respond outside of their normal activities. Plow trucks, same kind of theory. Our plow trucks are on a replacement cycle, so we don't replace all of our plow trucks in 1 year, which would be completely crazy in the cost. We try and replace them, a few of them every other year, every couple of years. We're working on the same thing for the police squads. That becomes more challenging because we typically buy all squads of the same make and model, so they don't change. So the parts are almost interchangeable. If we did 2 new squads every year, for example, because the models change, the parts wouldn't match up, so we wouldn't be able to repurpose equipment as readily. Plow trucks are kind of the same way. We have a pretty good crew there that are making repairs. Plowing is difficult on those vehicles. They're heavy equipment, but they get banged up, they get pushed around. Winters are rough. So having less plow trucks, less squads, yes, of course, that would mean less accidents, less wear and tear on the road, but our jobs wouldn't get any easier. They would still have to get done. Garbage trucks are the same way. Since we moved to the mechanical arm garbage trucks, you have more moving parts. Those moving parts wear. And as they wear, they need to be replaced. And at some point, we're sticking more into fixing things than it's worth. And we rely on our fleet superintendent to make those decisions. Trust me, I give him a hard time. I know Corey is with me on this every year, trying to make sure that we are at that threshold of fixing or buying new. And if we can fix and get by for a little while, we do. In talking with the fleet superintendent, the mechanic truck and van, as outlined in the 4-page summary that I provided, are critical needs. Those are the things that they must have. they're getting to the point where the vehicles they're using are impractical or unfunctional in some cases to allow our staff to do the job. The brush truck and plow for the fire department, as outlined, it's going to be a hand-me-down situation. So we're not buying a brand new truck just for plowing. That truck will be repurposed and then things will be handed down. And we do that frequently with our fleet. If vehicles, out of the 12 squads, for example, there may be vehicles that are still pretty good. They're not as abused. Maybe they weathered the use a little bit better. We're going to hand me down those vehicles to other departments to replace vehicles that are even older and more out of shape and impractical to use. So I would open it up to any other department heads that wanted to talk about it, but that is the best summary that I can provide.
Thank you. It was long. So,
sorry.
Yes. All right. Any other comments, questions from the committee? 1001, 1002. Waited 5 seconds, 6 seconds. All right. Anyone else? All right. Thank you, Corey. Please continue.
Okay, so next we've got the fire department. A couple of things going on. We've got $100,000 for a new training site. This is something that the fire department has been working on for a while and been requesting. So this is to get that started and get a training site up and running for the fire department. Also $25,000 for general fire equipment. That's more or less an annual item, as well as the $23,000 for turnout gear. Again, that's an annual item to keep all their gear and equipment up to date. We've got $15,000 for technical rescue equipment, $13,000 for a compressor and reels, $10,000 for lapel mics and radio equipment, and finally $10,000 for a fire extinguisher demonstration prop. And that last one is actually because the fire department does offer training on how to use fire extinguishers to community groups. So that demonstration prop actually would help the fire department with training members of the general public, as well as some different businesses and organizations in how to properly use a fire extinguisher. So anything on the fire department's capital items?
I just would like to comment that the prop for demonstration purposes, those are awesome. That's what we used when I was at the nuclear plant for basic, when you started, you have to learn how to use the fire extinguishers that are mounted everywhere. And that's what we used. And it was a great way to learn without using up a fire extinguisher and making a mess. So a great investment.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. All right, and then next we've got the Parks Department. So first of all, we've got $215,000 to replace the restroom at Iverson Park. This is another one that's been on the capital list for a long time and has been a request of the Parks Department for a long time to upgrade that restroom. We've also got $115,000 for resurfacing the tennis courts at Gerke Park. We've got $100,000 for new playground equipment at Buchholz to replace the playground set that's currently there. $75,000 to recoat the roof at the Willett Arena. $43,000 to recoat the water slide at the pool. We do have $30,000 to engineer the turf replacement at Gerke. However, I want to point out that's actually being paid with turf funds on hand. When that Gerke turf project was originally done, they were able to raise quite a bit of funds through private sources. So that's what that money is. So it's not actually coming out of the capital budget. It's coming out of funds that have been designated for that purpose. And then $16,000 to make tuck point repairs for the Boy Scout Lodge at Iverson Park. So any questions on the Parks Department?
Any questions from the committee?
Alder Dalton, I do have a question.
Certainly, proceed.
Looking at the restroom replacement, obviously there was quite a bit of surprise at what was proposed a few years ago at Tifner and the costs associated. And you may be able to guess, based on my work in the community, that I'm much more interested in reconstruction and redevelopment than replacing something and tearing it down. And so wondering if, one, there is really no room for reconstructing or saving what's there, which it seems like there isn't based on the summary, but also is this cost going to be reasonable for that?
Well, I'm not sure, but I suspect sometimes throwing good money after bad in a renovation is sometimes the case, but I guess I would let others sort of respond to that. Is that you again, Mr. Mayor?
It is.
How long are you going to be this time?
I believe Director Kramer is otherwise preoccupied and no longer on. I'm just going through the list of attendees.
I'm still here, Mayor. Yep.
Then
He's
I will
still there.
defer to Director Kramer.
Sure. So great question. So ultimately, what this price encompasses, to get to the question about Pifner Park, Pifner is a large scale restroom. So if you go in there and you count the number of fixtures in terms of the on the male urinal side and the toilets, as well as on the female side, which is the toilet partitions, the count of actual fixtures is more than double what this bathroom actually would be. And that's because of the large scale number of people. And that adds significant cost. While this is still not inexpensive, we do not anticipate that extent of expense because it's not as big of a restroom. However, this is the primary restroom for Iverson. So we have looked at a number of options, and where we're at in the process right now is, can it be remodeled and try to use this old building that doesn't have the clearance areas in terms of ADA accessibility, the widths from the doorway when you enter the building? Can that be even remodeled to allow you to have enough fixtures that are currently there and be up to today's standards? And the short version of it is, this estimate includes that architectural piece of it, where it will either be redesigned for a complete demo and a reconstruct, or if when we start that process, we get the engineer on board, if we discover it'd be cheaper to say gut the restroom and we could relay it out using the core of the building, we would explore that. But we have not had funds in the capital budget to really get into that piece. But if you've gone in there, and I'd encourage any alders or any people from the committee to go in, you'll see that this bathroom is due for this. So the estimate we got was from a local architect with design and basically demo and reconstruct. However, we want to explore both avenues and do the best one when we get into the process.
Thank you, Director Kramer. Anyone else from the committee or members of the public? I will wait my 5 to 7 seconds. All righty. Proceed, Corey.
Okay, and I see that Mary raised her hand. So
Alder, yeah, right.
Oh, Alder Kneebone. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead, Alder Kneebone.
I would like to save you all a trip to the Iverson restroom. I was just in there about a week or two ago, and I think this is a long overdue project. So I highly encourage everybody to support this.
Yeah, I'm with you there. So, all right. Go ahead, Corey.
Okay, and then finally, the last one, we've got the police department. They requested $35,000 to buy new pistols, and then they would sell the existing firearms that they would be replacing. So they estimate sale proceeds of about $10,000 for a net expense of $25,000. And I do see that Alder Dalton has raised her hand.
All right, go ahead, Alder Dalton.
Similar to my line of questions for other, replacement schedules of things. Obviously, we want, in this case, a piece of technology that has lethal force to be in proper working condition. But I'm wondering what the replacement cycle looks like for this item, and if there is an expansion of the armory that is, included in this, because, my brief research says, like, you know, if you're using 1,000 rounds a month, maybe 5 to 6 years, and I understand they get used in order to like make sure they're maintained, but just maybe some further explanation about what replacing this particular item looks like.
Good question. I had a similar question because if the weapons are being resold, I'm assuming they're in somewhat working order, and I didn't know what that change out of the rotation is of that. So I had a similar question. So thank you for asking it.
And I see Interim Chief Zenner.
All right. Yep.
Hello.
Go ahead.
Our handguns are on a 5-year rotation. We actually, at the 5-year mark, instead of renewing them at that point, we had rebuild kits that we can put in. We were having issues with our extractor pins on those, so we ended up doing a rebuild kit. So we're actually in the 3rd year on a rebuild kit from these that normally are on a 5-year exchange rate. As for our firearms, we normally in a year go from 6 to 8 range. Between ranges, these firearms can go through up to 200 rounds in each time. So at the point of where we're at 8 years, they've had several rounds gone through. And again, as I said, we're already 3 years past the normal exchange rate on a rebuild kit.
Thank you, Acting Chief Zenner. I appreciate that. All right. Other questions? Okie dokie then. Let's move on.
Okay, so actually that is the end of the capital presentation. So that does cover everything. So I guess if there's any other, general questions or comments that we need to discuss related to capital.
Alder Dalton, one quick question. The
Certainly.
Gas mask under the police department is noted removed, so that is no longer in the budget. It was kind of in the summary.
I can answer to that.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, the gas mask, another item that has been woefully past expiration date. However, at times during our investigation, we do receive asset forfeiture. So we're going to attempt to replace those gas masks, which actually are a fairly expensive item. At this point, we actually have all our officers that are issued one. We will be just going to our SWAT team members.
Thank you. I know we have a number of people from the public, I believe, wanting to provide some input, perhaps, and we'll get to that. I just wanted to mention that one of the things that I had asked to be put into the budget, aside from a couple of street projects, but was money for the engineering for Plover Crossing, the connection of the spur connecting the east side of Stevens Point with the west side of Stevens Point across the Plover River. It is not in there. I'm hoping that we can find a way to fund that. Always a challenge, but there's a significant amount of community support. And of course, this would actually create that connection for community, both figuratively and literally. So I'm hoping to kind of move that forward and work on a way to make that happen. So I would look to anyone who has members of the public who have anything to add, questions, comments, welcome them now. And I guess just unmute yourself and I'll try to catch up with you, and hopefully we won't have people talking at cross purpose.
This is Will Stites. Is this a good time for me to chime in with that?
Absolutely, Will. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'd just like to point out, and draw attention to some things that I suppose most of us are aware of. But unfortunately, and without there being any way to change this, our city is divided roughly in half by 4 lanes of very high-speed traffic. And a lot of the households and a lot of the new development in town is happening on the east side of the interstate, but a lot of the important amenities are on the west side. And some of those would be UWSP, Midstate Tech, the Green Circle Trail, Schmeeckley Reserve, a lot of the employment, riverfront, some of the important parks, municipal offices, Spash. I could go on, but I won't. And a practical route across I-39 is important for everybody, including people who live east of the interstate, but like maybe they're too young to drive, or they don't have access to a car, or they want to use facilities like the Green Circle, where a car would be like irrelevant or impractical. So I think it's still true that most of the population lives west of the interstate, but most of the shopping and commerce is kind of trending to move toward the east side. And it would be beneficial for both those businesses and for shoppers and the population to be able to reach those stores without needing a car and without having to brave the jungle of Highway 10 East. So the new trail would provide that access available to really the whole community. And it would also add a piece of Green Circle that would be one of the most beautiful parts of that trail. And that would enhance the appeal of one of our town's best attractions. And so for those reasons, I think it's important for us to try to bring this project into reality as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public who have comments about the capital budget as it was presented and things that weren't there? So, Ms. Finn, I see your hand up. I'm lucky enough to
spot that.
Your real hand, not your, your Zoom hand.
Yeah. Thank you. I've written my statement again in connection with the proposed Plover River crossing trail. I've lived in Stevens Point my whole life, and speaking in support of that Green Circle spur, it would be so much more than just a pretty trail for walkers and runners and bikers, like Mr. Stites said. It would provide an alternative transportation route that is much safer than crossing that I-39 overpass and navigating the hectic intersections nearby. Much groundwork has already been laid for this very important project. And now, while the land is available, time is of the essence. Therefore, I urge the Finance Committee to budget the necessary dollars to acquire the land for this project now. I don't think anyone could watch the Green Circle Committee's new video about this exciting project without picturing the trail and thinking of the many ways it would connect and benefit our community. Thank you.
You're very welcome. And just because it's getting late, I am setting the stopwatch. So, Mr. Menzel, you have your real hand up. Please proceed, and I am timing you.
I had submitted my comments in written form because I didn't know if I'd be able to make the meeting, so thanks for letting me speak. Name is Steve Menzel, and I'm a lifelong resident of Stevens Point community. I would also like to express my excitement and support for the proposed Plover River Crossing Trail. The trail spur would not only connect more people to the Green Circle Trail, it would provide an important transportation alternative that connects pedestrians and bikers on the east and west side of I-39 to businesses, schools, and neighborhoods. Residents on the west side could more safely bike or hike to places like Target, Culver's, Panic School, Holiday Inn, Ice Hawks Arena, and the PCYS soccer fields where my grandkids spend a lot of their time. Residents on the east side could more safely bike or hike to Washington School, UWSP, Century Insurance, and downtown Stevens Point. Plover River Crossing Trail spur would also be beautiful, passing through areas of wetland, meadow, and forest, and featuring a graceful arching bridge over the Plover River. This project is consistent with our comprehensive plan, and your city staff and department directors have done an amazing job of thoroughly exploring the idea. Right now, there's a really wonderful window of opportunity to make this happen. You have two adjacent landowners who amazingly are willing to sell the necessary parcels along the trail route. In view of all the background work that has been done by your staff with partners like the DOT and the DNR, you have a really great opportunity to secure a state grant through the DOT Transportation Alternative Program. Land acquisitions could be a once in a lifetime opportunity. We do not know if these will be available a year from now. State grant program may not exist in a few years either and would be a game changer if we could get it. With your support, the Plover River Crossing Trail could be another great reason to live, work, and play in Stevens Point. I urge you to put in your budget necessary funds to make this happen so that our community can benefit from this practical and scenic spur trail for generations to come. Thanks for giving me the chance to provide feedback on this great opportunity.
And thank you very much. I'm gonna reset my clock. I see Alder Kneebone. Excuse me, I'm terribly sorry.
That's you.
Thank you. Alder Kneebone has her hand up, and go ahead, Alder Kneebone.
I will just echo Ms. Finn and Mr. Menzel and say that I've gotten already an email from a Hull resident who lives on this side of 39, and they're excited about this and indicated a willingness to donate to the project. So I think this is going to excite a lot of people on my side of town, the east side of 39, and it's really going to provide it's safety primarily. It is not safe to ride on 10. It's just not. So this ticks so many boxes, and we have an opportunity to be forward thinking and plan for the future. So I hope we have to do this. Thanks.
Thank you, Alder Kneebone. I saw that former director Tom Schrader, now citizen Tom Schrader, had his hand up. So Mr. Schrader.
Can you hear me?
I certainly can.
I've been sitting on the Plover River Group Committee that's been working on this, and I had a chance to read the mayor's memo about the process and capital improvements, and being part of it for so long. I know it's very difficult when there's so many requests, you only have so much money to spend. And I understand land acquisition generally has not been in the plan. And in the mayor's memo, it kind of indicated there might be some other sources available to acquire the land. And I'm assuming the land acquisition account is no longer in the budget. It was taken out years ago. And in the past, we've kind of used, I should say I'm not part of it anymore. The cities use the unrestricted funds, to pick up parcels when they become available like this, because it's not in the line item budget anymore. So that could be a source, and maybe that's a source they're looking at. The only thing I guess I could ask is like the mayor called it earlier, putting it in a queue. If maybe you could put some money into the future so it doesn't get lost. When you read the word removed, it almost makes it sound like you're kind of removing this project. But if there was some money put into the future years, that might help keep the project there so people know it is there. So it's a potential in the future, whether it's a year from now or 2 years or 3 years, whatever, it's there and people see it. So that's it.
President Johnson, you're on mute.
I said everybody's staying under 3 minutes. I really appreciate that. So, Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind, Alder Leek had his hand up. And
okay, I just wanted to provide some clarifying things in regards to the land acquisition.
Sure. And I was hoping to do that too, so I'll let you do that in a minute. How does that sound?
I'll wait.
All right. Alder Leek, please go ahead.
I just wanted to add my voice to the chorus. This is quite close to my district. I think it would be a particular benefit to my district, and speaking more as a citizen than the alderperson from here, my daughter works at Target, and usually we can get her there by car, not always. And, I'm a little more nervous when she has to walk or bike there. And I think it'd be great if you had that crossing. But yeah, I'm not the one who would say that, so I'll keep it there.
All right, thank you. And then I promised the mayor, and then Alder Shore had his hand up too. So we'll go with that succession.
Thank you very much, Madam President. If you look at the narrative that was included in the packet, it addresses the land acquisition. First of all, I don't think you're going to find anybody on the planet that doesn't think this is a great project. I've actually been peripherally involved in some of this stuff. Director Lemke has talked about a Plover River crossing for years. There have been many citizens that have wanted this. This is a great project. The opportunity is now here to acquire that land, and that will likely happen before the end of the year. So acquiring the land and easements is absolutely critical for this project happening. That being said, because we believe it's going to still happen before 2021, staff has talked about how can we fund this, and Comptroller Treasurer can elaborate a little bit. We have alternate funding sources. We don't need to put a land acquisition in the 2021 budget because we're going to want to do it this year. So that will likely involve, should an opportunity come up, and we believe it will, a special council meeting to approve those funds for the land and easement purchases. That is critical. The other segments of this, because there's so much community buy-in and so much support, even Alderperson Kneebone alluded to that, there's going to be groups that want to contribute to this and allow that fundraising to happen, so it's not all on the shoulders of the city to bear this burden. And I think we can do that. I think you'll have people throwing money at you to make this good project happen. Land acquisition is not in the 2021 capital budget because it's going to happen in 2020 in all likelihood, and we will find a funding source for that. I give you my commitment, and I know the rest of your staff will give you that commitment. And I'd ask Corey to talk a little bit about where those funds would come from in 2020.
Sure. So for 2020, for the land acquisition, we could look at two different sources. We do have the city property fund, which could do at least a portion of it. And that fund is, the proceeds in there are from rental income for some of the properties that the city has purchased and doesn't have a use for right now, but is renting those out. So that could at least be part of it. And then any remaining amount could come out of fund balance.
All right, thank you both, Mr. Mayor and Comptroller Treasurer. I believe it is now Alder Shore's turn, and then a member of the public, Neil Prendergast, had asked to speak as well.
Thank you. Well, I'll start by saying that I also heard from a couple constituents who are passionately supportive of this, and you know, even more than I realized. I guess this discussion is indicating that there is consensus, and that there is not only consensus, but a real sensitivity to the time sensitivity of this, of staying ahead of grant cycles, and how important the engineering study is for that as well, for 2021, as well as the land purchase coming up immediately. I guess what's underlying the question here is that we've talked about the overall of the costs of maintaining current capital versus acquiring additional, right? That and that the staff wants to know from decision makers from the political level, which is us, that that new acquisitions like this are not going to be at the expense of being committed to upkeep of what we already have. And so, which is a roundabout way of saying that we'll need to be clear about that. We'll need to be clear about the responsibility for that, and making sure that those things live together. And that includes, as we kind of look at levy and how that all adds up. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Prendergast, it is your time. If you take yourself off of mute, please speak.
Okay. Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, if you could just speak up just a little bit, please.
Sure thing. Is that better?
A little bit, yeah. Your
Okay.
voice is fairly quiet.
I'll be loud. Thanks.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I just echo all the positive comments that have been made about the project so far, and also want to observe just how the funding for this, as others have pointed out, is going to have multiple sources. And I just wanted to kind of just bring into the conversation the timeline for the TAP grants. The TAP grant we've had a great fortune in the past with in the city of Stevens Point. And I think, to my knowledge, we're 1 for 1 on TAP grants. So we might have the perception that that's, you're always going to get it. But that's not necessarily the case. And I just want to make certain that we have as many chances as possible for that before any of those funds would run out. So as you're creative about how to fund this project, I just ask that the council, department heads and others keep in mind the TAP grant deadlines and trying to get as many chances at bat there as we can get. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else who wishes to speak to this topic or any other item on the capital? Again, bear in mind, as Corey said earlier, that there's no action. This has been a great discussion, great engagement by department heads, the alders, the mayors, the mayor, we only have one, and members of the public. We will be taking action on this in October. So that's second Monday in October. One last word, Mr. Mayor.
Absolutely. And I would be remiss if we didn't mention it, because every one of your department heads worked very diligently on this capital presentation. The comptroller, treasurer, and myself are a piece of it, but your department heads are really the ones that are charged with prioritizing the needs, and they can't be thanked enough for their hard work in putting this capital budget together and subsequently the proposal that you see in front of you.
Absolutely. I can't say enough. Well, speaking as staff myself, my daytime job, yes, department heads do a lot of wonderful work. So my budget has been submitted already. All right.
I'd like to speak. This is Alder Slowinski.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't see you, so I didn't know you wanted to speak. Forgive me.
No, it's all good.
Go ahead.
I guess I just want to comment on this discussion regarding this the Plover River crossing. Like I had stated last time we had this discussion, I think this is a great project, but it needs to be our entire community involved, not just Stevens Point, right from the start. Because once we jump in the water and invest our money and our time, we're pretty much in it for the long haul. No matter if we get funding from anyone else, we're in it now. Why is it that we cannot start soliciting other municipalities, Town Hall, Village of Plover, the county, the university? They're talking their budgets for 2021 right now. Why are we not starting the process now of getting this group together to make this a community project? It always comes back to the city of Stevens Point. We need to do it now. We need to do it now. We got to get it in this budget. The mayor talking about, we're going to do this year. We're committing to it already. We don't have anybody else committed to this project. Yes, we've had people saying, oh, I'm supportive. I'll donate. Are they going to do it? I received an email from somebody today basically supporting this project. And I called them back. And I said, do you live in the city? Oh, no, I live in the town of Village of Park Ridge. I said, have you went to your board members of the village? Oh, I never thought of that. Why is it always the city of Stevens Point taxpayers that have to fund these projects? I mean, again, what is it, 100,000 we're looking for? But now we're into it. And other municipalities surrounding us, they can just look back and say, you know what, city's in it now, they're going to do it. They'll take care of it. And then it's all on the taxpayers of the city. I really, really hope my fellow alders start thinking of our constituents. And again, I'm very supportive of this project. I would definitely want to be part of it. But this is a group effort here, and we need to start right now, not invest the money and then put our hand out. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I agree, it's a group effort. I appreciate that sentiment, which I believe is happening as we speak, or not as we speak at this moment, but in a figurative way. However, I do listen to my constituents, and they wonder how, and this is probably getting off track, and I'm sure the attorney will tell me to shut up, but the grade separation on Hoover Avenue is not used by many people in my district, but is sure used by a lot of people who live in Plover. So that money came out of the Business 51 jurisdictional transfer. So we make decisions all the time. I agree, Alder Slawinski, we need to have collaborative work. We need to work with our partners, the cities, the surrounding townships, Plover, Whiting. We need to do good regional planning, and that should start absolutely right now. But we've made decisions in the past that have left out many people to the advantage of people outside of the city of Stevens Point in an attempt to create greater connectivity. So I hope as we move forward, and I appreciate that you, Alder Slawinski, worked on this project as a capstone. I think you can be a valuable asset to this, and I look forward to working with many community partners to making this happen. So I appreciate your comments. I sincerely do. So anyone else? Trying to be fair. All righty. Moving on, I think that's it. What's the next item on our agenda? I've kind of forgotten.
So the next item is the Community Development Director has a request to apply for WEDC idle sites redevelopment grant. So Director Konoski, if you're on.
I am still here. Mid-State Technical College is, as hopefully everyone here knows, is pursuing an advanced manufacturing education facility located what I'll call just south of the Jorns building in the Stevens Point Industrial Park. As part of that and the city's commitment to furthering this project along, we have identified using the Idle Sites Redevelopment Program grant that's offered through the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation. With how a lot of WEDC grants are focused, the municipality has to apply for the grant itself and then pass that money through to the to Mid-State or to a developer, whomever else. And so we are identifying a number of costs with the Idle Site Redevelopment Grant through the Mid-State Education Facility project. And right now we're likely going to be submitting sooner rather than later for this. As some folks on the council may recall, anytime we apply for a WEDC grant, there is a resolution that has to be attached to that application, indicating that the municipality, the governing body, has authorized staff essentially to apply for the grant on behalf of, in this case, Mid-State Tech. So the Idle Sites grant can be utilized for a number of things within the Mid-State project itself. Most of it's going to be infrastructure focused things like curb, gutter, anything with water lines, sewer lines, stormwater management, environmental contamination, things of that nature. And that's really where the focus of this is going to be. It's a, I believe, 30% match. And so the $250,000 will be utilized for infrastructure. This essentially just authorizes us to work with Mid-State to apply on their behalf.
All right, and you need action from us approving to proceed?
Correct.
All righty. I would entertain a motion from a member of the Finance Committee.
Alder Morrow, so moved.
Alder Morrow made the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second Alder Slawinski.
Thank you, Alder Slawinski. Any additional discussion other than what, or questions for Director Konoski? Excellent. Barring any other discussion and I'm interrupted, I'm calling for the vote. All those in favor, please vote aye.
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 I saw you, Alder Short.
Yeah, the space bar didn't work again.
Yep, I gotcha. I read your lips. So, all right. Anyone opposed, please say no. Motion carried. Thank you. And the next item on the agenda is US EPA fiscal year 2021 Brownfields Coalition Assessment Grant. Stan Tech task order number 3. Is this Director Kronoski as well?
Yes, indeed. So as the committee may recall, in 2017, the city successfully applied for a US EPA Brownfields Coalition Assessment Grant that's managed out of the Chicago EPA office. We received $300,000 as part of that grant program. Stantec Consulting has been the city's partner throughout the administration of that grant program to date, and actually the grant is set to be expired on our current cycle, September of 2021. We are seeking to reapply for the same grant. Stantec has offered to do that at no cost to the city. To date, we've spent about 83% of the $300,000. So it's been a really successful grant. We've utilized it for a number of phase 1 and phase 2 environmental reports, several remedial action reports, among others. And so we intend to continue to utilize this program as long as it's available because of how much we've used it and of how involved we've been as part of the EPA's program itself. The EPA is very comfortable encouraging us to reapply for this grant, and that's what I'll say about that. So we are looking to approve this Stantec task order number 3, which is Stantec applying for the grant on our behalf. Again, that's being done at no cost to the city.
That's very nice of Stantec. I work with them quite a bit and find them very easy to work with. Again, I'm assuming you're looking for approval to proceed?
Yes, please.
I would entertain a motion from a member of the Finance Committee.
Alder Slowinski, I move to approve.
Thank you, Alder Slowinski. Is there a second?
Morrow, I second.
And Alder Morrow, second. Any discussion from members of the committee? Other alders or members of the public? All right. Call the vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed would be no. Motion carries. All right, the hour is getting late, but we still have the discussion on awarding grants and subsidies to outside organizations. For our new alders, this is something that last year at the budget cycle, we decided, we had a great deal of discussion about money that is given to outside agencies that help us achieve our goals, the Business Council and others. And the question came up about primarily from the Stevens Point Alliance is how do they get some of that money? And we didn't have a good answer. So Alder Shore and I got together and we brought forward a proposal, and we now require at least a scope of services and a contract for outside agencies who are going to get funding from the city to actually do what we hope they will do and be good stewards of the taxpayers' money. We have not yet set up a metric, though, for evaluating that. So we need to have a discussion about that. We don't have anything really right now, but the idea is agencies that are not agencies of Stevens Point who wish to be funded, how do we go about requesting their interest in that funding, and then how do we evaluate that? Does that kind of capture it, Corey?
Yes, I think so. I know that Alder Shore also has some thoughts on this as well. But,
very well. Go ahead, Alder Shore.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we have discussed this but we didn't reach a conclusion, and I can offer a few thoughts that might be helpful. One thing that I took away from that last discussion was that the Portage County Business Council support, number one, obviously it's larger than any other that we provide. But I also got from the discussion that it is an ongoing cooperation, that that they serve a role in assisting, for instance, in the business park with marketing, that they're involved regularly whenever there's discussion of bringing a new major project to town, a new company, employer, and that for those reasons, it maybe didn't fall into the same category of supporting a cultural or charitable organization, that that it was a cooperation agreement. Now, that doesn't affect the question of clarifying the terms and the understandings, which was a question that I know you, President Johnson, pressed months back, and I believe there's been follow through on that. I don't know if we need to take time to go into those details, but the point mainly is that some of the differences between that and others, that there might be grounds for seeing those differences and treating differently. Okay, so that's point one. We've had a lot of discussion this evening about budgetary constraints, and so I think personally it would be hard to see growing the total amount under discussion here, and so this is something that Comptroller Treasurer and I have discussed a little bit further. Look at how it all adds up, and it has been a total of $52,000 in recent years. If Portage County Business Council support remained at that same level and we kept the total at the same level, that would leave only $17,000 for anything else. That's point two. And then if both of those are true, and we're treating Portage County Business Council as that, in that kind of ongoing relationship context, and there's 17,000 total balance, and a couple of things that have like support for city band that have been over the years fairly consistent. So then question three is the kinds of questions that you were just raising, President Johnson, of how to treat others. Do we want to have a new understanding, if not application process or criteria, each year with something like city band? Do we want to have anything that tends to recur in this category? Because the whole reason that the issue came up was that we had a new request, and that forced us to look at, well, why do we already do what we do, right? So to what extent do we want to have anything that sort of semi-automatically renews, which might be justifiable at relatively low levels, or do we not want to have any of that and want to have an application process and a decision process? So hopefully that helps lay the issues out.
Yeah, I sort of see it as the question is, number one, do we want to continue to allocate a sum of money that we will award to outside agencies? Question number one, right? Question number two, if the answer is no, that's easy. Then we don't have to have any more discussion. If the answer is yes, then we need to decide, do we solicit to outside agencies requests for use of that money? And then how do we evaluate that? And that's, I want to start this discussion now. I think we'll see this play out over the next couple of months. But at a minimum, I think I would like to see next month a decision, because we'll have budget discussion next month, right? And I would like to at least have the finance committee have this discussion. Do we add it in? And if not, that's easy. If we do, then we most definitely have to have some discussions about that allocation. Any members of the finance committee who have additional input on that?
This is Alder Slawinski.
Sure, go ahead.
I guess just my initial thoughts, I guess. You know, if I recall correctly, last year we had that, the downtown businesses, I can't remember what was it,
Stevens
the Alliance?
Point Alliance. Stevens Point
You know,
Alliance.
I kind of felt bad. You know, they came in, you know, requesting funds, and, you know, it was kind of last minute, but
yeah,
I just have a, you know, I feel bad because, you know, we are granting money to these outside entities, and
excuse me,
I guess I just have a fear, you know, that if we, you know, like say, like Alder Shore had stated, that what the 52,000 was kind of has been the number in the last few years. You know, if we put that out there, I mean, are we going to have, you know, I just don't know. I don't want this to turn into, you know, well, this organization is more important to us than this one, and, you know, everybody's going to be torn, and it could get kind of messy. So I don't know. That's just my first, I guess, thoughts are, you know, I mean, where does it stop when we, you know, and who makes that decision? You know, and we make it obviously as a council, but it's always going to be somebody's going to walk away from the table, you know, upset. So.
Yeah, I agree with you, Alder Slawinski. That's why I wanted to have the discussion, is what kind of metric would we use to say you're a successful organization and worthy, have the merit and the capabilities to execute the goals of providing that money. So yeah, I agree. It's a challenging choice. Thanks for your input. Other members of the committee?
Alder Dalton.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I appreciate this being brought back up, because there is the kind of hesitation with, do certain organizations just rely on the city as the line item in their budget? And my perspective is that there's a lot of new and exciting things happening and ideas, and I support the city having a pool of funds available to encourage those. And so I like the idea of a pool that's available, and maybe there's the process for applying it is kind of a twice a year. There's like 2 deadlines within it, and I think a limit being like no more than $1 per citizen is something that seems to make sense to me, to keep it within reasonable, because often some really big things can happen with even just very small amounts. And yeah, and I think that I'm not interested in setting too tight of expectations on what's necessary project or idea is, but that there is a kind of direction that an organization is moving in, an intention to use the funds. You know, I think there's frustrations where a group comes and they have a presentation about, we've got this money from the city, and oh, we made a new website this year, and it's like, okay, well, did the city pay for your website? That just doesn't seem like something the city should probably pay for. So having the expectation that they can demonstrate some impact on the community. Yeah.
Thank you for that input. I'll go to the mayor and then other members of the council and the members of the public. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, President Johnson. The idea of creating a almost like a grant program, I think, is one that has significant merit. As Alder Dalton just said, what do you do for the community? What do the citizens get back? For example, you have Create Portage County has a $10,000 allocation in the budget because they provide services that benefit the community. They are the primary. They used to be the Arts Alliance, and they provide that creativity, the trash canvas, some of the placemaking, Levitt Amp. Those are all things that have value to the community. I know they started kind of bleeding into the economic development realm, and that's good because it's a component of it. However, we've got Director Cook on here. The Portage County Business Council also gets money from the city to be the economic development driver and coordinator of that. There are many things that come into economic development. Parks and Recreation, for example, comes into play with that as well. The downtown businesses, we have, as a city, contributed significantly already to some of the things downtown. Arguably, we could invest the same money in North Division Street or the South Side or the East Side. The bid district is something that I think is pretty significant that hasn't been talked about at this body very much. No. But Director Karnosky has met several times with the Stevens Point Alliance to propose just that, creating a district, a business improvement district, specifically in this case for the downtown businesses, affords them the opportunity to invest in themselves to create whatever it is that bid district has for a goal. So I think it's important that we also recognize some of the alternative funding sources for some of these entities.
Thank you. And we were getting slightly off on that. So I'm glad you stopped because I was going to stop you. All right. Other members of the council. Alder Jennings, go ahead.
I want to follow the mayor's comments. I absolutely agree with him. And I know this is a complex discussion, but when money is being asked to advertise, that seems to not be the appropriate use of taxpayer dollars. And so in terms of deciding what the metric is going to be and what people are using money for, I agree with the mayor that it really needs to be community-based, and also alternatives for self-funding need to be looked at. But I will disagree with money being used to advertise individual businesses.
Does that include what the Business Council does? Because they spend a lot of money on advertising.
Are they self-advertising or are they advertising the community? Yeah, I can't answer that.
Yeah, a little bit of both. So I'm just trying to clarify there. So thank you. Other members of the council. Alder Zarazua.
Thank you. I like the idea of us kind of making some parameters to how we're giving out funds. I do just want to stress that while all of the organizations that we support are important, I think we realize the impact of the downtown being a dense tax base, and that we really need a healthy downtown for a healthy city. So I know they're doing a lot out of pocket to try to boost downtown. If you haven't been down there on a Wednesday night with the lights lit up, it's so cool. But I just think that maybe marketing is not the appropriate thing for them to ask for money for, but I think given what they've gone through with COVID, I know we had a grant for them for that, but not all businesses benefited from that. I think we're going to see a lot of struggles from downtown businesses, and I think that is a fear in the overall picture of who in our city would benefit from some grant funding, that we should look at that.
And thank you, Alder Zarazua. Any other alders? Oh, and we will go back to Alder Shore.
So just to say, because so my professional background is in grant making on the private foundation side and evaluating grant performance. The scale of resources we're talking about here, you know, generally speaking, is like in the 5 figures, roughly, right? And I am just here to say that, I mean, you can make careful choices about that, and you can look at some things having to do with impact and what you're seeking, but these are really small resources. And they're not scaled to the kinds of things like a community, you know, just look at what a community foundation does, right? And so I just want to kind of put a caution out there that I have a question about what kind of impact we'll be able to seek or find with this, you know, this modest scale of resources.
Invest wisely, as they say.
Well, I just now I'm kind of the conversation is making me more skeptical, more leaning towards scaling back. I mean, I know politically, you know, it's going to make us Scrooge-like or Grinch-like, whatever. But I think, and you know, even at the outside limit of what we might consider, it's just not very much.
Yeah, it's not a lot, but for nonprofits, it's a lot. I've worked for nonprofits, so
if
good discussion.
If you're dividing it up, it's not a lot.
No, but I'm the president of a nonprofit, and $3,000 can make or break that nonprofit. So, and we work on a statewide level. So, Director Kranowski.
Yeah. So just real quick, you know, if the conversation is going down the path of, well, maybe we need to look at our resource allocation and reduce it or cut it completely, just know, I mean, some of the day-to-day economic development activities that is handled by my department would have to be, well, let me back up a little bit. Economic development done either by Portage County Business Council or Create Portage County, that type of activity, if we still want to see economic development in this area continue, is going to have to be picked up somewhere, right? So you're not going to have it just a magical net increase in economic development if you reduce, you know, Portage County Business Council or Create or whatever. You know, so the resource allocation is going to have to be allocated elsewhere. And unless you're seriously looking at adding economic development staff to city staff payroll, I don't, you know, you look at the bang for the buck, right? And so that's something to consider as well. I think that the relationship with the business council has gotten a lot better since our agreement was put into place last January. You know, I think about how quick we were in the response to COVID-19 with Create and the business council, and we saw a collaboration with the economic recovery team that was, I don't think that there had been that kind of collaboration previously, and it was nice to see. You know, so there's a lot of merit, and these groups are assets, and that's something that should be taken into consideration as we go through the budgeting process. But at the end of the day, my point was going to be that if you take responsibilities through funding away from business council, Create, or the band or whomever else, those resources have to be made up somewhere else if you expect to maintain the same level of service. So unless you're going to be talking about adding community development staff to address some of these things, it's, you know, staff is still in support of doing what we can for the business council because they do help us with some of the economic development things like marketing at the end of the day. So,
if I may, one last time, just very briefly.
Absolutely.
Director Konoski, bringing me back to the point I was making about what category we consider these in, right? That is an argument for, particularly in the case of the business council, seeing it in the context of a collaboration that is more closely connected to the core business of the city, right? And unless you're saying that, every piece that we've been dispersing like this is similar to that, I'm not sure they are. So that's it.
And I just wanted to echo what Director Kronowski said about the economic recovery team that he and I pulled together, the business council and all the other collaborative partners. That is what we really need more of. And it was an amazing experience to see that many people working side by side, making sure that Portage County, not just Stevens Point, Portage County got to the other side of this. So yeah, it was a great experience, and that work continues. Anyone else? All right, we will see this come back next month. And I just wanted to make a clarification. I wish to thank the mayor for reminding me to make sure I speak correctly. It wasn't a jurisdictional transfer. It was money earmarked from former Congressman Dave Obey for Business 51 Reconstruct, the money that was used for the grade separation. So thank you for making me accurate, even at 10 o'clock at night. So
this is Alder Slowinski.
Sure.
One, I guess, quick question. Maybe this is towards Alder Shore. Regarding his experience in his field of his profession. Mm-hmm. Do we have is there any way we can research other municipalities? I'm going to guess that they go through these same things. Is there something, a process that they use? Have we looked at that? Just to kind of maybe give us some guidance.
Good question.
I mean, I think that to make it apples to apples, I would want it to be smaller municipalities that kind of are under this kind of similar, really harsh tight budgetary considerations that we have. That's what would it might be worth looking at if we find kind of true peers.
Okay, yeah, I'm just kind of throwing stuff out there, trying to give us some ideas and guidance.
Thanks.
President Johnson, you're muted.
It's muted because my dogs are getting their medicine, and when they get their medicine, they get a treat, and they bark when they're getting a treat. That's why I was muted. So, did you have something more, Mr. Mayor?
I do not. We can certainly look into some of our surrounding municipalities, Wisconsin Rapids, Wausau, Marshfield. As I said earlier, we're all under the same tough budget constraints. Trust me, I've talked to the mayors and we talk frequently enough about this, trying finding creative ways to solve our budget problems. But those would be what I would consider comparable municipalities.
Thank you for doing that. So it is a good question. Why should we recreate the wheel if there's already a wheel created? All right, the last item on our agenda, or second to last, is approval of the claims paid. And I know you're all tired, so I would entertain a motion to approve the claims that have already been paid.
Alder Morrow, so moved. Approved.
We have a motion. Is there a second? You guys can't go home until we get a second.
Anyone?
I'll second.
One.
I'll give it to Alder Slowinski. Any questions about the claims paid? All right, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed would be no. Motion carries. And then we are done. It is 9:47. We have exhausted our agenda and we are done for the evening. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for the discussion. Thanks for hanging in there. And thank you for all of the feedback. It's great. It's a great part of a democracy.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.